The Stork King's Tale, The Magical Adventures of King Rajendra and his courtier Kashi. Hello everyone. Today we will explore together the interesting story of the White Stork King, an Indian fairy tale full of meaning and life lessons. This story takes us on an exciting adventure where the lines between humans and animals become blurred. We follow King Rajendra and his minister Kashi as they transform into white storks, explore the world from a new perspective, and learn valuable lessons about humility, prudence, and the value of living in the moment. The Stork King's Tale, The Magical Adventures of King Rajendra and his courtier Kashi. In ancient India, there was a young king named Rajendra who ruled the prosperous kingdom of Magadha. The king was known for his kindness and treated his subjects as his own children. At the king's side was always a loyal courtier named Kashi, who had an impressive beard that reached down to his knees. King Rajendra held this courtier in high regard. One afternoon, after a royal banquet, King Rajendra noticed that Kashi looked pensive, sighing occasionally. The king kindly asked, "Hey Kashi, what's bothering you?" "Your Majesty, you are truly wise and understand my heart. Although your Majesty has treated me very well for a long time, today I dare not ask for favors. This morning a merchant from Persia arrived in the capital, bringing many valuable treasures that I cannot afford to buy." "Is that all you are sad about?" The king smiled. "Summon the merchant here. I will give you anything you wish for." Kashi was overjoyed and bowed his head in thanks. An officer was immediately sent to search the capital for the merchant. When the Persian merchant entered, the king said, "Open all the things in the chest and see." The king said as he observed the merchant, small in stature, gentle in face, but eyes sparkling with intelligence, simple in clothing but exuding elegance. The merchant bowed and opened the chest. The king exclaimed, "Oh my gosh, how wonderful!" Indeed, the chest was filled with gold and jade jewelry, intricately carved, and diamonds that sparkled brilliantly under the palace lights. Kashi asked the king, "Your Majesty, are these treasures beautiful?" The king nodded, looking satisfied. "Absolutely beautiful." Hearing the king's praise, the Persian merchant smiled and took out a small black box from the bottom of his casket and offered it. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low so that the king would not see his pale face, "this is a real treasure. I bought it in the distant land of Maya. It is so precious that I am sure all the treasures in the world combined could not compare to it. I bought it at a very high price and, according to the seller, have never opened it. I believe that inside is a priceless treasure, the only one in the world." King Rajendra and his courtier Kashi heard this and bowed their heads to take a look. When they opened the box, there was only a small amount of fine black powder, on which was a piece of palm leaf engraved with strange words. "Strange, strange," muttered the king. "What is this?" replied Persian, trembling. "I don't know either. I only know that it is very precious." "I cannot read these words," said the king. "Kashi, if you can read them, please read them to me." "Your Majesty, I don't understand a word. Let me invite the Vedic priest in. He can probably read it." A moment later, the Vedic priest entered. The king said, "Veda, read the words on this palm leaf. If you can read it, I will reward you handsomely. If you cannot read it, you will be severely punished." The Vedic priest was frightened, but when he saw the palm leaf, his face brightened. "Your Majesty, this is an ancient Sanskrit text. I will read it to you. Whoever finds this treasure is blessed by the gods. Give thanks to Brahma for this boon. Just this small pinch of powder is enough to bring joy for 1,000 lifetimes. Just inhale a little bit of this powder into your nose and recite the mantra, Om Namo Narayana, and you can transform yourself into an animal at will and be able to speak and hear the voice of that animal. When you need to return to your original form, just turn your face to the east, bow and recite 3 times, Om Namo Narayana, and you will immediately return to your human form. But be careful, if you laugh while transformed into an animal, you will forget the spell and never return to your original form and will live forever in the form of an animal." King Rajendra was overjoyed after hearing this. "Veda, I forbid you to reveal this to anyone. If you reveal this, I will punish you severely. Go find the treasurer and tell him to reward you with 2 bags full of gold." And turning back to Kashi, the king smiled and said, "I must test this treasure immediately, my lord." Kashi hastily replied, Your Majesty, that's true. We should try it now. Your Majesty will only turn into an animal for a moment. It's nothing. That's right, the king nodded. I don't need your advice. Come with me. We'll go to the royal garden. There should be many animals there for me to choose from. An hour later, King Rajendra and his courtier Kashi entered the royal garden without any attendants. The king looked around and whispered to Kashi, "There's not a bird in sight. Should we go to the elephant stables?" But it was not necessary. On the other side was a large lotus pond, the lotus flowers in full bloom giving off a sweet fragrance. 3 white storks were intently hunting in the water. A fourth, puffing out its chest, strode proudly on its long legs, searching for frogs. "There, Your Majesty!" exclaimed Kashi. "The way those storks walk and the look in their eyes, they must be having some fun." The king excitedly replied, "Wonderful! Hey Kashi, you're a trustworthy retainer, transforming into 2 storks. Oh my, what a fun experience! But remember how to turn back into human form, or we'll be in trouble." "Your Majesty, just face the east, bow and recite Om Namo Narayana 3 times and you can return to human form," Kashi reminded. "That's right. There's nothing to not remember. It's just a small matter." King Rajendra said confidently, then took out the box containing the magic powder. He took out a little and gave it to Kashi and a little for himself. As they inhaled the powder, they both recited the mantra. In the blink of an eye, a miraculous transformation occurred. Their legs lengthened, wings sprouted from their shoulders, white feathers covered their bodies, while their heads and necks lengthened into sharp beaks. King Rajendra and Kashi had completely transformed into 2 white storks. The king was overjoyed and spoke in his new language. "Hey Kashi, do I look pretty? Wow, your beak is so long as your beard when you were human." Kashi leaned over, brushing his feathers with his beak. "Your Majesty is truly blessed. Whether as a king or a stork, Your Majesty always exudes majesty. I believe that now those storks will no longer be afraid of us because we have become their kind." The king was eager to find out. "Come, let us approach them. I am curious if we can hear the voices of the storks." The stork king Rajendra and the stork minister Kashi took just a few long steps to reach the lotus pond. Miraculously, the calls from the stork's beaks suddenly became clear, and both of them could understand them thanks to their new stork ears. A stork spoke, "Hey, Sister Padmavati, the lake water is so clear today. There are so many frogs. Hey, try this one, it's delicious." Padmavati, a young stork with snow-white feathers, brushed her beak against her wing and replied, "I don't need to eat or drink anything, sister. I just came here to take a cool bath. My mother said that tomorrow there is a ceremony to worship Brahma. I have to prepare beautifully to dance to welcome the distinguished guests. Hey sister, I know a wonderful dance called the Lotus Dance. Let me perform for you." The young stork began to dance gracefully. Sometimes she lowered herself into the water. Sometimes she stretched herself high, her wings flapping rhythmically and her long neck wriggling comically. This scene caused both King Rajendra and Kashi to burst into hearty laughter. The merry laughter of King Rajendra and his courtier Kashi startled the flock of storks, which flapped their wings and flew away. King Vikram, in the form of a white stork, jumped up and down in excitement. "Oh, Kashi, I have never seen anything so amusing," exclaimed the king. Alas, if we had not laughed so loudly, we might have heard them talking longer now. But Kashi, also in the form of a stork, suddenly looked worried. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid we've made a grave mistake. Do you remember the spell to return to human form? The spell we had to recite 3 times? King Rajendra suddenly felt worried. "Oh no, I can't remember either. Kashi, do you remember? We have to turn in which direction? Which direction?" And read. Kashi tried to remember. Om, Shanti. No, that's not it. Shiva, Shakti. Oh, I can't remember, Your Majesty. The 2 tried to recall the mantra for hours. They faced the setting sun, trying to chant the ancient Sanskrit words, but to no avail. Finally, exhausted, they collapsed to the ground. "We'll be storks forever," Kashi lamented. But King Vikram, even in his stork form, retained the demeanor of a king. "Don't cry anymore, Kashi. We must face our fate courageously. Perhaps this is the karma from past actions. Let's accept it and find joy in this new life. After all, being a stork has its own fun. We can fly freely in the blue sky." As night fell, the 2 friends found a place to rest. The next morning, they hovered over the city of Pataliputra, making mournful sounds. The people heard them and whispered, "That's an omen! Something bad is about to happen to the kingdom." By evening, rumors of the king's disappearance had spread throughout the kingdom of Magadha. In the ancient kingdom of Magadha, King Rajendra and his courtier Kashi were transformed into a pair of white storks by a mysterious curse. They flew to the roof of the palace, trying to attract the attention of the court and the people, but no one could understand the birds' cries. There was only one way to break the curse: recall 3 ancient Sanskrit words to restore their human form. Hungry and thirsty, the 2 kings and their subjects, transformed into storks, were forced to eat fruit and drink lake water. At night, they slept on tree branches, not daring to eat frogs like the other storks. After more than a week of living in misery, they witnessed the scene of the capital city of Pataliputra suddenly becoming unusually bustling. The streets were decorated with flags and gates were erected everywhere. A grand procession marched through the city, with armed soldiers and the sound of drums and gongs resounding. In the midst of the procession, a young man on horseback, escorted solemnly by military officers, appeared. King Rajendra, in the form of a white stork, suddenly screamed in pain, "That is the son of my enemy! It is Karna, son of Duryodhana, who once invaded my kingdom but was defeated by me." The king continued, his voice filled with indignation. "He swore revenge on me. Now he has plotted to deceive me and usurp the throne. You petty man." Kashi, also in stork form, nodded in agreement. "That's right, your majesty. It was that cunning Karna who disguised himself to deceive us. How despicable." King Rajendra, filled with sorrow, said, "Let us go, Kashi. Pataliputra is no longer our kingdom. They have taken it over. Let us fly to the land of Jayanta. Perhaps there we will find sages who will help us break this curse." So the master and his disciples said goodbye to the capital city of Pataliputra and flapped their wings towards Jayanta. Not used to flying, after only a few hours, their wings were tired. "Your Majesty, I would like to rest for a while." "Your Majesty flies too fast. It is already late afternoon. We should find a place to stay for the night." "Yes, there is an ancient ruined temple on that hill. Let's stop there and rest." The king and his subjects flew to the temple. Inside was a damp, dark room. Suddenly, Kashi stopped the king. "Your Majesty, do you hear anything?" Kashi whispered, "It sounds like someone is crying." The king listened. "There's crying, that's strange. I have to go in and see." "Your Majesty, please don't be reckless. This place doesn't seem safe. We should find another place." But the king did not listen and went inside. Kashi quickly used his beak to pull the king's wing back, accidentally losing a few feathers. "Ouch, that hurts! Don't pluck my feathers!" Inside was pitch black. The wailing was heard more clearly, like a human voice. Looking closely, the king saw only a large owl in the corner of the room. Gathering all his courage, the king asked, "Who's crying in there?" The owl was startled, and when it saw the 2 storks, it cried out in surprise, "2 storks! 2 storks! Oh my God, we're saved!" King Rajendra was very surprised because the owl spoke with a human voice and spoke clearly. He asked, "Oh strange owl, why do you cry? And how can you speak human language? I suspect that you too carry a curse like us. Tell me your story." The owl wiped away the tears with its dark brown wings, bowed its head and replied, "Sir, I don't know who you are, but from your voice, I realize that you are also a miserable person. The sages have prophesied that one day if I could return to human form, that miracle would come from a god in the form of a stork. So when I saw you two, I couldn't contain my joy. O gods, I fear I can be of no help to you. When you hear our story, you will see that our pain is so deep that I can only offer you compassion." King Rajendra told the owl the story of himself and his companion Kashi. After listening, the owl sighed, "Your Majesty, I see that our fates are similar. If you are the king, then I am Princess Padmavati, the only daughter of the king of Vasumitra. The sorcerer Duryodhana, who murdered you, once came to propose to me. But my father, thinking him evil, chased him out of the palace. Humiliated, he disguised himself as a palace servant and used a magic box to trick me. So I was transformed into an owl, and while the palace maids searched for me everywhere, he brought me to this tower, locked me up here and said, 'You will stay here until someone comes along and agrees to marry you. Only then will you be able to return to human form.' but I will keep your existence a secret. You will stay here for the rest of your life, growing old and dying like the other owls. That is the price you must pay for your father's arrogance." Having said that, he left. I cannot go anywhere here because my feet are tied tightly. For more than 3 months now, I have had to live here in silence, unable to see the sunlight. I have had to eat bats and rats, chew moss to survive. Your Majesty, my fate is much more miserable than yours. You still have companions and can fly everywhere, but I must stay here for the rest of my life." "Strange," the king muttered. "Our fates are indeed similar. It must be the will of the gods." "That must be so, Your Majesty. I think I am being punished like this because I was disrespectful to my mother before. What crime has Your Majesty committed? So where are you going now?" "We are going to Kailasa Temple to pray to Lord Shiva for help." The owl shook its head, then suddenly its eyes lit up strangely. "Your Majesty, I don't think you and the Mandarin need to go to Kailasa Temple anymore. I have a way to save all 3 of us." King Rajendra asked hastily, "How? How?" Kashi was equally impatient. "Please advise me, Princess." Princess Padmavati replied, "Every full moon night, Karna's men gather in the castle across the hill. They feast and recount the mischief they have done over the past month. Perhaps in their conversation, they will mention the spell that Your Majesty has forgotten. And if I remember correctly, tonight is the full moon night." King Rajendra was overjoyed. "Princess, how wonderful! You are our savior. Quickly, show me the way to the castle." "Kashi, cut the rope that binds the princess's feet. Princess, please show us the way." The 2 storks pleaded, but Princess Padmavati had a serious expression. "I will help you too, but I have one condition. If you 2 agree, I will go with you." King Rajendra was hasty. "I accept any condition. What do you need?" Princess Padmavati spoke softly, her voice as sweet as a bird's song. "Your Majesty Rajendra, I hope you can help me get rid of this curse. Only if someone is willing to marry me can I be freed from this ugly owl form. So Your Majesty, if you or Minister Kashi here promise to marry me." King Rajendra pulled Kashi away and whispered, "Now Kashi, it is time to show your loyalty. Take the princess as your wife." Kashi trembled, his face pale. "Your Majesty, if I bring the princess back, my wife will gouge out my eyes. She is very fierce." "Your Majesty, don't forget that I am married. Moreover, I am old, with white hair and beard. Your Majesty is still young, unmarried, and is a much more suitable match for the princess than I am." King Rajendra stroked his beard pensively. "Who said you're a beautiful young princess? Not necessarily. Maybe this is buying an elephant out of thin air." Kashi respectfully but firmly replied, "Your Majesty, I would rather be a white stork for the rest of my life than bring disaster upon myself. If Your Majesty knew my wife's character." The 2 argued for a while longer, and finally the king had to agree to marry the owl as his queen. Hearing the king's consent, Princess Padmavati was extremely happy. "We'll be back in human form soon. Today is the day the Rakshasa party. They've probably started partying by now. We have to go now." Having said this, the owl led the way, flying heavily but swiftly. The 2 storks hurried after her. When they reached the castle, the princess pointed her beak to a small window where the 2 storks could perch and look into the banquet hall. King Rajendra and Kashi landed gently, listening attentively. Inside, the scene was extremely bustling. Candles were lit, and the aroma of food filled the air. Around the banquet table were more than 60 demons. In the crowd, the king recognized the wizard who had transformed himself into a stork. The wizard was telling the story of Rajendra and Kashi. King Rajendra thought to himself, "How lucky we are that we came at the right time. If we had been a little later, we would have lost our chance." Both of them listened attentively. Laughter broke out when the wizard reached the funny part. Another devil asked curiously, "Interesting, so how did you get into the palace, and what was that mysterious spell?" Outside, King Rajendra and Kashi held their breath, not daring to move a hair. The mantra? It's an ancient Sanskrit mantra, very difficult to remember. Once forgotten, they will never remember it again. It's Om Namo Narayana. After hearing that, the 2 storks didn't need to listen anymore and quickly flew down, so fast that the owl had a hard time keeping up. King Rajendra said joyfully, "Princess Padmavati, how fortunate. Before we return to human form, I repeat my promise. I will marry you as my queen to repay this favor." Having said this, the king turned to face the east, bowed his head, and recited Om Namo Narayana 3 times. Kashi followed suit. In a flash, both of them revealed their true colors. King Rajendra had returned to his handsome form, and Kashi had returned to his knee-length beard. The two looked at each other, so happy and moved that they hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. After wiping his tears, King Rajendra suddenly remembered the owl. But oh, what an indescribable joy! When he turned back, he saw no sign of the owl, but instead a beautiful princess like an apsara, a beauty that no artist could sculpt into a statue. She was dressed in a gorgeous sari, and the smile on her lips was brighter than the jewels on her crown. King Rajendra felt ashamed of his earlier words, but joy overcame all. He lifted the princess up and gently kissed her hand. If anyone asks me about the happiest moment in my life, I will not hesitate to say that it was the moment I transformed into a white stork. Without delay, King Rajendra, along with Princess Padmavati and Minister Kashi, set out. Selling his precious robe, the king bought 3 thoroughbred horses and hired a retinue to return to the capital of Magadha, worthy of his royal status. When the group returned to the capital, the people welcomed them with boundless joy. The usurper Ravana had announced the death of the king, and now seeing the king return, the people were so happy that they seemed to go crazy with happiness. Ravana was captured and faced with 2 options: commit suicide or be a white stork. He chose the latter. So Ravana had to inhale a pinch of magic powder and recite the mantra Om Namo Narayana while facing west. He turned into a white stork and was imprisoned in the royal garden for the rest of his life. That was the karma he had to bear, and no one could complain on his behalf. King Rajendra ascended the throne again, and Magadha enjoyed peace once more. The people celebrated with great feasts for 7 days. The king granted amnesty to all criminals and held a grand wedding with Princess Padmavati. One day, remembering the old story, King Rajendra smiled and said to Kashi, "Do you still remember our life as storks? I can never forget the sight of you stretching your neck to the west, stammering, Om Hrim Na. You looked so miserable at that time." Kashi smiled and whispered in the king's ear, "Your Majesty, please don't mock me too much. Otherwise, I will tell the queen about our argument in the bell tower that day. If the queen knew that your Majesty described her as an ugly old woman with a beard that reached her knees, she would be very sad." King Rajendra quickly replied, Okay. Don't mention that again, my lord. Let's talk about something else." The story of King Rajendra and his experiences is not only an entertaining tale, but also contains many profound lessons about Buddhism. Let's explore 3 important lessons that we can learn from this story. 1. Impermanence. Everything changes. The first and perhaps most obvious lesson from this story is the impermanence of life. King Rajendra, from a powerful king, in the blink of an eye became an ordinary white stork. This illustrates the fundamental Buddhist teaching of impermanence, anicca, that everything in the universe, including our own lives, is constantly changing. The transformation from human to stork and back again is not just a fairy tale miracle, but also a profound metaphor for the uncertain nature of life. It reminds us that our status, power, and even our physical form can change at any moment. Understanding this, we will be less attached to temporary things and focus on spiritual development, which the Buddha taught is the most important and eternal thing. Bookmark, quo. Cause and effect. Every action has consequences. The second lesson concerns the law of karma. In the story, we see clearly that every action leads to a corresponding result. Karna, the usurper, eventually suffered the consequences of his evil actions by being transformed into a stork and imprisoned. On the other hand, King Rajendra's kindness and patience were eventually rewarded when he returned to the throne and married Princess Padmavati. This reflects the Buddha's teaching of karma, that every action, word, and thought we do has its own consequences. It encourages us to live an ethical life, always thinking carefully before we act, because we will reap what we sow. Bookmark 1. Nanar 3. The middle way, the path of balance. The third lesson, more subtle but no less important, is about the middle way, one of the core teachings of Buddhism. Throughout his journey, King Rajendra demonstrated a balance between extremes. He did not cling to power as a king, nor did he despair as a stork. Instead, he remained calm and wise in all situations. This illustrates the Buddha's teaching of the middle way, the path of balance between indulgence and extreme asceticism. It reminds us that to achieve happiness and enlightenment, we need to avoid extremes and seek balance in life. Bookmark. Conclude. The story of King Rajendra is not only an entertaining tale, but also a profound lesson in Buddhism. It reminds us of the impermanence of life, the importance of living ethically, and the value of finding balance. By applying these lessons to our daily lives, we can move closer to the path of enlightenment that the Buddha showed us. By the end of the story, King Rajendra and Kashi have become wiser men with a better understanding of the true nature of life. They no longer cling to status or fame, but instead focus on ruling their country with justice and compassion. They often remind each other of the lessons they learned during their strange adventure. King Rajendra, now an enlightened leader, applied Buddhist principles to his governance. He encouraged his people to practice compassion, live ethically, and seek balance in life. Under his leadership, the kingdom of Magadha became prosperous not only materially, but also spiritually. Queen Padmavati, with her wisdom and compassion, became an inspiration to women in the kingdom. She founded many schools and monasteries where people, regardless of gender or social status, could learn about Buddhism and develop themselves. Kashi, the king's loyal friend, became a famous Buddhist scholar. He wrote many books about his experiences and the lessons learned from them, spreading the Buddha's teachings to all levels of society. Even Ravana, the usurper now reduced to a stork, was not left out. King Rajendra visited him frequently and spoke to him, helping him understand his mistakes and guiding him on the path of reformation. This demonstrated unconditional compassion, one of the most important teachings of Buddhism. The story of King Rajendra and his experiences became a legend passed down through generations in the kingdom of Magadha. It was not only an entertaining story, but also a means of conveying the profound teachings of Buddhism in an easy and accessible way to the people. Every year, on the anniversary of King Rajendra's return to the throne, the people of Magadha celebrate a grand festival. During this festival, the story is retold, and people reflect on its valuable lessons. Children are encouraged to act out the characters in the story, helping them gain a deeper understanding of its meaning. In particular, during this festival, people are encouraged to perform good deeds, showing compassion and understanding. Many people choose to forgive those who have hurt them, while others take the time to help those less fortunate. This is how they apply the lessons from the story to real life. Over time, the influence of the story and its lessons spread beyond the borders of Magadha. Neighboring kingdoms began sending envoys to learn about how to govern their countries based on the Buddhist principles that King Rajendra had adopted. This gradually created a network of peaceful and prosperous states in the region. King Rajendra, despite becoming a great and revered king, remained humble. He often reminded himself and those around him of the lesson of impermanence he had learned. He said, "Today I am a king, but tomorrow I may be a stork. So let us live each day as if it were our last, and treat everyone with kindness and respect." Queen Padmavati, through her experience as an owl, developed a special love for nature and animals. She established many sanctuaries in her kingdom where animals could live safely and freely. She often said, "Every life is precious and deserves respect, be it human or animal." Kashi, with his signature long beard, became a symbol of patience and perseverance. He often joked that growing his long beard taught him a better lesson in patience than being turned into a stork. He used this image to teach people about the importance of perseverance on the path of spiritual practice and self-development. As he grew old, King Rajendra decided to abdicate and spend his final years practicing and teaching Buddhism. He passed the throne to his son, who he had carefully instructed in how to rule the country based on Buddhist principles. King Rajendra and Queen Padmavati traveled the country together, sharing their story and the valuable lessons they learned. Before passing away, King Rajendra left a final message for his people. Remember, this life is as impermanent as a dream, but it is in that impermanence that we find the opportunity to create good things, to love and to grow. Do not fear change. embrace it as an inevitable part of life. And above all, always treat everyone, every living being, with compassion and respect. Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to a video from the Buddhist Folktales collection, which is broadcast at 7 p.m. every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on the YouTube channel Buddhastory, Master You. We sincerely thank you for watching. To not miss the upcoming episodes, please remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you find the content useful, please share this video with your family and friends. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Please leave a comment below the video so we can discuss and share together. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Namo Sakyamuni Buddha.